my baby, but maybe other people have also screaming babies behind them. But I will mute myself, but other people have also screaming babies behind them. But okay, I think we are live now. I was checking on my phone. Maybe I will wait for people to arrive a little bit before I start. So maybe I can start now. So welcome everyone to the third event of Quinzena'21. For those who missed the last two sessions, Quinzena comes from the word quinze in Portuguese, which is 15. So it's 15 days of conversation, such as this one. If you missed the previous two ones, you can check them out on YouTube, on INSTITUTO's YouTube channel. Today's event is dedicated to emerging practices, and I am joined by a very large and interesting group from all over Europe. So first off, we will have Leah Grange and Tom Fury. They are directors of Studio 163, which is an architecture, design, and research practice based in London, and may I say Norwich also. Yes. I read somewhere that Norwich is the most inaccessible place in the UK.
It is. It's getting better though.
Yeah, maybe it makes it the more charming and mysterious. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about where that is. And I know that this is at least Leah's first official appearance at Studio 163, so it's exciting time. Then we have the principals of depA architects from Porto. We have Carlos Azevedo, João Crisóstomo, and Luís Sobral. They are joining us from their 3 remote locations in Porto. depA are curating the Portuguese pavilion at this year's Venice Biennale, which I'm very excited to hear about. And finally, we have João Quintela from Lisbon and Tim Simon from Hamburg. Together, they form JQTS Studio, who do serial research into the open field of architecture. It's quite a beautiful, poetic way of describing yourselves on your website. First of all, I want to acknowledge something, which is the fact that we have accidentally outnumbered the number of men to women in this session by 6 to 1. I'm sorry, Leah. But it wasn't on purpose. I actually tried to avoid this happening, but it's completely okay. I just wanted to acknowledge it, and actually it got me thinking about whether there are more guys than girls starting architecture practices, but I think that's a conversation for another time. It was just on my mind these days. So the way we will structure this event is we will have the presentations first. We will follow the order of the poster. And then that will be followed by a conversation moderated by myself. And at any point in the presentations and the conversations, everyone watching can comment or ask questions. You are encouraged to do so on the YouTube live page and the Facebook live page. So yeah, without further ado, I think that's how you say it in English, we can have Studio 163 present.
Yeah.
Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great.
Right. So yeah, hi. We just wanted to thank Catarina and Porto INSTITUTO for having us tonight. So we are Studio 163. So it's a small practice based in between Norwich and London, and made out of 2 people. So myself, Leah, and Tom. I studied in France at the School of Architecture of Lyon, And then I did an Erasmus program in Bath University. And then I moved to London and I worked in different practice for 8 years before forming Studio 163 in 2018.
Hi everybody, my name is Tom. Thanks again to Catarina for hosting. So I did my bachelor's in Bath University, part 1 in the UK, and then moved to London to my master's at the Royal College of Art, graduating in 2015. I've spent most of my time since then working in private practice, mainly in the urban design and master planning sector.
So first, we're going to speak a bit about the challenge that we faced as a small practice to find new work and to expand our areas of interest. Then we're going to explain what kind of our points of interest are, and then how we diversifying our project across all the sectors.
So even if we were obviously a small company, a small practice, but we have sort of been obviously UK focused, but we have started to work sort of further afield. So we've started to work in Belfast, Northern Ireland, done some work in Dublin, and then looking sort of towards the continent. So done some work in Italy, Montenegro, and also in France. But obviously, we want to kind of continue to build on that and to develop sort of connections, internationally as much as possible. And so I thought we'd just maybe start by just talking a little bit about the UK context, and maybe this is familiar to some people, maybe it's not, but I think it's kind of an interesting sort of basis to start from, maybe start a conversation about how we sort of try and get work in the UK and sort of splitting that between the public and private sectors. What you find in the UK particularly is that the public sector particularly has quite sort of limiting and sort of exclusive requirements in terms of sort of financial security, about insurance, that they're sort of prioritized much more than they are over sort of design factors. And then sort of there's an estimate that maybe between sort of 70 to 90% of UK practices are sort of excluded from this process just by virtue of these factors, which obviously is quite difficult for small and emerging practices to find work. And likewise in the private sector, even though it is more flexible, there is this sort of this attitude towards risk, which sort of limits exposure and accessibility for small firms. So what you get is this sort of funneling. I'm sure this is maybe the case in many countries and many situations, but this sort of concentration of practices in one sector, which is the sort of private resi market, and you get this concentration of work. But not to say that we don't obviously we love working on houses and homes and creating spaces for people. This was our first sort of finished built project, which is a home in South London. And I think it just sort of exemplifies our attitude to sort of materials and creating a very sort of simple and sort of natural palette of material, using kind of local labor, using joinery wherever possible. So it's just sort of, it's just one of the first things we did as a company.
Yeah, so I think although, about 90% of our work is residential and probably will carry on to be residential extension and refurbishment, we always was trying to find out how we could, get past that and, getting past this pigeonhole situation where all of our job will be only residential, and how we could, bring all of our interest in, urban design, as well as, community-led projects or slightly smaller, bigger scale, housing, as a small practice. So we looked in London about housing.
And sort of trying to incorporate these interests into our sort of day-to-day work. So this is a graph which maybe some people are familiar with, but it basically just represents sort of housing affordability in the UK in the post-war period. And what you can see, obviously, house prices sort of spiked, let's say, up between sort of 80s and 90s period onwards. And that's happened for various reasons, but for one sort of theory or one sort of attitude is that the public sector hasn't sort of delivered enough in the sort of post-war period. So we're trying to, in a very sort of small way, to kind of incorporate that theme into our work. And so just thinking about the kind of London context, this is a sort of land use map of the city, and there's obviously various ways you can, if there's a pressure to build housing particularly, that there is various ways you can do that. One is, let's say, through the green belt, the sort of protected green circular zone around the periphery of the city. There's public land, obviously, and one area that we're looking at as a company is brownfield land, particularly, which is, it can be defined in many ways, but it's effectively sort of leftover, can be transport land that sort of had it's sort of formerly industrial use that's now no longer so sort of functional. And it's estimated that maybe that as a designation can sort of unlock about 130,000 homes across the city. So we were sort of trying to see how with this whole kind of context, how we can kind of be a part of that.
And yeah, I think the problem with this, all those brownfield land is that they're kind of like owned by the council or the London authority or developers, and it felt that it was quite difficult as a practice of two people, a new practice to get through it and get access to those sites, at this early stage. So we basically had the idea that maybe we could contact a lot of estate agents across London that will have, a lot of leftover sites that they could not sell for various reasons. And through them getting through clients that actually then will employ us to add value to those sites and do planning permission. And so for us, it was a really good way to show our skills, but also get access to those, interesting and challenging sites. So one of those sites where was in South London. It was a store. You can see a derelict store. So you can see it's a really small plot of land here that wasn't used for many years. It's between, you see a railway line here. There's quite busy roads. There is also a pedestrian bridge crossing the railway line. So there is a lot of, overview and noise issue on this site. The size as well was quite problematic. And this is a plan. You get basically around it, there is mainly commercial use, schools, and really little housing. But luckily in that street, there was some kind of like dump yard leftover sites, but also some housing that was still remaining. And this is the site here, so quite a small footprint. So what we've done was we took the whole footprint and basically, extruded that footprint to become a massing, creating like a pitch roof to be kind of similar to the grain around it. And then we played with voids, because obviously I'm sure it's the same everywhere else, but in London, when you provide new housing, you have to provide a certain number of square meters of outdoor amenity. So we had to create, some like a balcony, a courtyard, and then using, as well, this courtyard to bring more light within the plan, because obviously on that side is the railway line. So we kind of wanted to be quite closed off for noise. And then on this side, although it's the main entrance, it's also a really busy road. And so we basically created that scheme that you can see is not, it's not similar necessarily to the grain of the house around it, but it's not too dissimilar. And we then also, played with this double height space in the living room to provide more light through the plan and create some, with more detailing, but some privacy from the pedestrian bridge. So as a result, we created a 2-bed house with the right number of square meter and of amenity space. And actually we had a really good feedback from the planners and got planning. And then the site was actually sold. So then they basically gave us a second site to look at, which is again another leftover land with some disused garage. There was a substation that was also a challenge because we needed to retain access to that substation. Obviously, lots of housing around. There was quite residential with a school around it, so more privacy and overlooking issues. And still, again, a railway line here, so you had really to create a buffer for the new housing we're proposing. So this is the scheme we proposed. So it's a 2-bed house and a 3-bed house. The massing was creating with different alignments, to match those housing here, those housing there, and then creating different heights and orientation of the building for privacy, light. So for example, here we have a setback from those houses here. And so to create privacy, not only from the other houses, but also between themselves. And then we retain the access to the substation and providing access as well for fire access or emergency. So that was the scheme that we proposed for planning, with also quite a lot of soft landscaping for parking, some planting, and then, as I said, the substation access, and then retaining quite nice, really calm palettes with good quality brick. And this one as well got planning and now is currently in development. So I think for us it was really interesting to to get access to the sites and basically train as well as ourselves as well in terms of planning and dealing with slightly bigger scheme and have fun, to be honest, in I mean, obviously for architects, those sites are quite interesting. And then the other ways as well that we're trying to do to get new job or at least learn is to do a lot of collaboration through real projects or competition, but trying, to do a different scale and community-led projects.
So yeah, this is a kind of a chance to really think at sort of a different scale. So this was a competition we did with a partner architect in Italy. Michele Zanatta was the name of the firm, and it was really a competition about sort of borders and national boundaries. As the project takes place on the kind of transition between Italy and Slovenia. So on the west you have this sort of historic romantic Italian city called Gorizia, and on the east you have this sort of post-war Eastern European different type of settlement. And there's sort of this the task is really to sort of encourage sort of movement of people and sort of thoughts and ideas across these two sort of formerly divided states. And so in practice, the competition was really to kind of create this sort of pedestrian and cycle connection through a bridge over the railway tracks, and to create a sort of a new public and cultural destination sort of outside the station square. And I think the important point really for us is that this is sort of more an opportunity to kind of really engage with other ideas and other thoughts from other practices, which, as a small practice, when you're just two people, you want to kind of expose yourself to different ways of thinking, and that was a really good experience for us. This one is also a sort of public realm project, but it's sort of driven out of the sort of COVID crisis. Really, it's a square in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and the task really was to sort of activate a public space for kind of outdoor functions and restaurants and bars and those sorts of activities. So we just developed this sort of triangular grid, which is based off this sort of distancing principle, and that could then generate the system where you sort of you might kind of create furniture, seating, covered areas, and so on from that. And the idea is that maybe one day this could become a more sort of permanent thing. That the sort of conversation is going on between the city council and sort of other stakeholders, but this could just form a more sort of more permanent thing, which has resonance beyond this crisis.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of like community as well led project, I think we took part in several competitions in London. So for the London Festival of Architecture, so that one was last year, and we did it with an architect called Robbie Reid in London. The brief was basically, it was again a small leftover piece of land, and the brief was to provide a kind of a shelter for for different functions, but done on a very, very low budget and easy buildable, because it wouldn't necessarily be builders building it, but more probably the community coming together. So we created this shelter made out of, so this is a polytunnel, which is usually used in farming for growing plants underneath it in winter. So it is obviously waterproof, and then, using pallets and OSB wood. And so we provided some detail of construction detail, and the idea is underneath you could have, workshops, community lectures, yoga, and we propose as well this kind of garden landscape that will be made for the people to just come in and do some gardening themselves, which, to have people that don't have garden in London, for example. And another project as well we had done was, so it's called a store. So it was a leftover a piazza in South London. So we basically created, I don't know if you see, but this kind of store in the center of the plaza that would, separate the space in different areas. So on one side it would be maybe a place for a market, and then you could put it back in the store. And on the other side, the store could open up and become a lecture or event, or even gigs on some instance. And the other side could be for gardening, again, to provide a bit of nature. So I think this is kind of the project we really enjoy doing and want to carry on doing beyond just the extension. Although again, we really do like doing this, and we love bespoke joinery and things like that. But I guess it is just how to, as a small practice with two people, we can get to that really. And we think, for the moment it is working for us that way. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
How do we stop sharing?
Great. Thank you very much. And now we have depA.
Hi, So, Carlos, we share the screen. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Catarina and INSTITUTO, for the invitation for this conversation. Well, actually, yesterday when we started to prepare this conversation, we did some work, and we visited the Facebook of INSTITUTO to figure out what were the Catarina expectations about our presentation. And we saw that you were talking about three topics: rehabilitation, temporary installations, and curation. And of course that we are working with Bienal Veneza, and we thought that we were thinking in a presentation in which you can talk a little bit about this, about that work. But well, the working is going on, is not finished yet. So actually we prepared something that fits with these three topics, because it has something it's related with our work. We don't understand architecture like something that is related just with the drawing. It's something that is more has more amplitude. So we'll present like a small medley of three works by the three of us, me, Carlos, and João, that are representing a team of 10 people with 9 architects and 1 journalist. So for the first work, we'll present a small rehabilitation that we did in Matosinhos. It's a small house in a very tiny plot. Like, we can find a lot of plots or houses like that here in Porto area. So when we arrived to the site, we found these very interesting constructions in the backyard, and we thought that you can use this kind of evolutive or informal evolutive construction to start the project. So we worked in this small house, keeping the volumetry of the original house with 2 floors, and we worked with this extension on the backyard, trying to give a new feeling to the house, to have a more lighting space and a more larger space as well. We can see here in this section this very strong intention to have this communication since the entrance that faces the street until the end of the plot where we have the last patio. Well, it's a very simple project, but it's somehow related with this idea that we try to transport to our residential buildings, in which we don't have a very defined space. So the client can use this new building or this new part of the building in the backyard for different uses, like living space, an working area, a playing space for the kids. So I think that it's the most important, this very small project, so we can travel around the pictures of José Campos a little bit. So now we are moving again to the original house and going upstairs for the bedroom area.
Hello. And now we are trying to move fast to keep some rhythm here, so you don't get bored. On the second act or the second dimension of our work, we are going to show Sulku, which was finished by 2019, and it's part of a bigger project in which we participated in two different dimensions. So we were first part of the planning group called ODUS, which is a group of, it's a collaboration between three practices, young practices, FAR, Steel Urban Design and depA. And we did the planning of this kind of network of interventions in the northwest of the country. The idea was to create 10 interventions that somehow dealt with the landscape and could bring some new meaning to existing spaces. Luckily, we had the opportunity to work as well as to participate as well with an intervention. And we were presented by this great location in which we should do some meaningful architecture. This space had two, the most important idea for us was to deal with these two scales. So we have this very low rise vegetation, a kind of some humid area, but then you had the huge mountain on the back that set the background for this great place. The idea was then to deal with these kind of two scales. So in a first moment, to go next to the low rise vegetation, but then somehow push the visitor to the bigger landscape dimension. The idea was then to connect this place with a network of tracking. Sorry, I missed the word. Hiking paths. So the location was not so ideally if you look at the back, because you had this kind of building that existed there and a parking area. So we wanted to disconnect with it and really focus on the background, thus creating this diagonal object that had no real relation with the two other elements. You can see here, as I was just saying, we have this kind of two dimensions. So first you go down and you connect with the vegetation, which is has its very own specific things to find out. But then you see a kind of a landmark a bit far away after the woods, which will mark the start of the path. As such, you start going down a slope, a small ramp, and then you go up the stairs. It's very, very simple. It's just, we wanted this to be just a kind of a slice in the landscape. So we kept it to as minimal as possible. And you'll see in the pictures that it's just a sulco, as a trench dig in the landscape. It was also meant to be very easy to assemble and low impact on the landscape. So in a couple of years, when you want to take this away and do something else with the materials, you can just push it away and everything will be back as it was. As I was just saying, you can see the assemble process was quite simple. It was just an object that we wanted to dig in the plot. And then this is the finished knife cut, let's call it like that, that you see. Going through it, you can see after the woods the kind of this target that will point you to the mountains. And you see, we were lucky enough to have a snowed winter at this time. So you see here the slice or the cut on the plot. Also here, the site is really, really great. It was already great before we had the opportunity to work there. So we decided to go as light as possible. And you see here some more pictures. Of course, it changes a lot as you go around. And it also changes a lot with the different seasons. So you see here, and then from this place, you just feel the will to go and climb the mountain. Of course, there's then the hiking path that is marked, so you can go around it. And also, you can see that the animals acknowledge the work and is still there. So if you want to visit, it is still there. Also, just to mention, all the pictures are by José Campos and Filipa, and they're also a great part of they can translate very well the greatness of the place.
So finally, we want also to share with you another dimension of our work, which has to be or has to do with curation and teaching. Actually, you don't see architecture as something that we only do in the office, apart from the rest of the world or from the rest of the disciplines. We think it as part of many things coming together, and of course, one of these dimensions is thinking. And it has to do with the curation of some exhibitions, some articles, and of course, the dimension of teaching. It's also important. We are also teachers at the University of Coimbra, and we have been also invited for several workshops. Here we just go through this In Conflict project, which is the name of our curatorship for the Portuguese pavilion in Venice. It must have happened last year, of course, but I can imagine you know why it hasn't happened yet. So we hope it will happen this year. And of course, because of this, this project is still something that will open during the year. We cannot unveil too much, but of course, we want to invite you to go through our websites and social media, because all pavilions also have now this greater dimension, the online dimension, because also of the pandemic situation. Well, our curatorship will be based in 3 main points: exhibition itself, the physical exhibition, and of course the debates, because we will enhance the relation and explore the relationship between architecture itself and the public in general, which is something that during the years has been lost somehow, and we don't think architecture should be something outside of the real world. So the debates with multidisciplinary teams will be a very important part of the curatorship. Also, some debates were chosen by an open call that we made last year, and both the exhibition and the debate will be translated or will be put together in 2 different catalogs, one for the exhibition and one for the debate. So it will be held in the beautiful Palazzo, Justinian Lolin Palazzo in Venice. And of course, everybody is invited to be there, and especially to participate in the debate, the debates I have been talking about. Both the physical, if it's possible, because they will be held in Venice, in Porto, and in Lisbon. But of course, for those who can show up, are invited for the online debates, and the calendar will be shown very, very soon. But yes, the exhibition then enhances this relationship, as I said, between architecture and the public through the media. And this is not any article about the projects that we will show. but just to say that through the media, it's the way that architecture meets the real life and the real people, and both architecture and the people should mingle and discuss and debate architecture and understand each other and come together somehow. And finally, we can invite you to see our sneak peek video, and this is how much we can go.
Super. I can't wait for
how
it.
far we can go right now.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So in 2 seconds, I'm sorry, I just want to say thank you a lot to our team, of course, and especially in this project to the designers who defined our graphical identity, Mariana Marques and Inês Nepomuceno. And also, I want to say thank you to Sara Nunes from Building Pictures who made this video. Thank you.
Wow, super interesting. Can't wait to go or look at it online. Yes, now JQTS. Wow. Now you have to tell us how you say your name fast.
JQTS.
You said as slow as me.
Of course, it could be different in German or in Portuguese, but of course, being international, I think JQTS is working the best.
It's nice. There's like QT, a QT. That's nice. Anyway. Yeah.
Yes, of course, I would also like to start with saying thank you for the invitation and the possibility of participating today here in this event. Just to introduce us quickly, we are Joao Quintilla and Tim Simon. Together we are JQTS. Joao is living in Lisbon while I'm living in Hamburg, and in this constellation we are already doing projects for, I think, 8 years. And besides our practice, we are also involved in teaching in Lisbon and in Hamburg, and both are also following a PhD. To give you an insight in our practice, our thoughts and our activities today, we would like to talk about common structures. It's a term that we were creating, and we are somehow trying to collect under this term the architectural topics that became relevant for us throughout our practice, but also throughout our teaching and researching. And to approach the topic of the common structures, we would like to start with Aldo van Eyck and his playgrounds that he was doing in Amsterdam. By appropriating empty plots within the city, he is demonstrating the potential for common use of leftover spaces in the urban fabric. And his effort is to integrate those playgrounds as part of the urban landscape instead of isolating them. So creating places not just for children, but for everyone. And like this, he's basically trying to create spots of social activity. So spots where people can meet and interact. And he was very much interested in people's behavior with space and architecture, and analyzing people's movement and how people interact with space. And his answer to this kind of analysis is are these simple geometric gestures that we are seeing here in this kind of map, and which are not imitating but corresponding to the original forms of people's movement. And with those objects that he was using for his playgrounds, he's somehow trying to support activities but never influencing them too much or even forcing activities. We can see this in this image, for example. So by using those very basic objects done in concrete and placing them in the urban fabric, he's creating spaces that are open for interpretation. So of course, those objects are generating the possibility of playing, but at the same time, they could be also just read as objects to sit or to stand on top of them. Besides those concrete structures, he was also working with steel structures in those playgrounds. And those steel structures appearing in a much more filigree way, which is also a result of the material properties that Aldo van Eyck was always taking care of. And in those steel structures, he is working with archetypical forms like arches and domes in order to create those spatial structures that can be then appropriated by the people. And what he is doing is basically placing pure constructions in the urban landscape, which are based on common principles of construction that are comprehensible for everyone, so everyone can read and understand, everyone can feel part of it. So by making use of this basic vocabulary, he's also somehow addressing a common knowledge. And in this way, calling people's appropriation and interaction. And we can see a similar approach, even if it's a completely different scale, a different context, but somehow a similar approach in this project of Lina Bobardi, where she's basically lifting up the box of the museum, and by this creating a public square under the box that is free to be used and appropriated by the people. And by expressing the structural system, she's giving even more meaning to this gesture of hanging the box. And this is a great example how architecture can take care of human needs and improve the conditions of life within the city. And to illustrate this idea of the common structures, we would now like to show quickly two projects of us from very different times, different contexts, and also very different scales. It's one project, it's the Povara Pavilion as one of our first build projects. And then we would like to show a competition proposal for communal housing, which is one of our last projects. The Povara Pavilion was created as a temporary structure for the 10th anniversary of the Blue Theatre in Almada, which was celebrated with a small festival. Our structure is placed in between, there's Joe's mouse, in between the main stage for the festival, which is marked here in red, and the Blue Theatre that you can see on the left corner of that image. And our intention in this project was to avoid the common separation between audience and actor. So looking to history, we were very much interested in this kind of 360-degree theater, like you can find in the typology of the amphitheater. So instead of, can you go on? So instead of creating this kind of scenography as a flat background, we were thinking much more about the structure that can be freely appropriated by the actor as well as by the audience. So what we were doing is basically picking up this supporting element behind the scenography that you can see here in the photography, and define it as our architectural element to work with and to create space and structure with this element. You can see it as this element is a self-supporting structure. It needs to resist to gravity, but it's not carrying any load. So we could give a certain filigree that is answering to the structural needs, but also serving somehow our creative demands. And besides those spatial and typological ideas that I was mentioning, the project was also very much defined by a small budget of 1,000 euros. So before really starting the project, there was also the question appearing, what are really the materials that we can work with having such a small budget? So we ended up with those 5 by 5 centimeter bars. And basically we decided to spend all the money in materials, which was just possible because the final design and the process of building was organized in a workshop with students. And together we developed the final project, but also the structural system in order to simplify the process of building as much as possible. So like this, we could produce all the modules in parallel with very basic tools and a minimum of craftsman's knowledge. And in this way, the process of building became also very much a collective process. By simply repeating the same element a lot of times and joining it into an interconnected structure, we were able to build up space and form. And like this, we could generate a coherence between the construction, the spatiality, and the architectural expression. To make the whole structure stable in itself, but also to define the two entrances on both sides of that pavilion, we were introducing this T that you can see here, which is basically just a composition of two structural elements, a horizontal beam carried by a vertical pillar. But at the same time, it also has the symbolic meaning of an entrance, and also creating a moment of scenography, because entering to this space, you have to take a decision if you're going to the right or to the left. So it's a kind of first act of a performance that is taking place in that moment. And furthermore, this blue that we were adding to the T, it's also a very direct relation to the blue theater that you can here see in the back very softly. Here you can see some images of the finished project, which is completely defined by the structural elements. And the structure waiting somehow to be appropriated and the action to happen. And apart from this, apart from being responsible for the architecture, we were also taking care and organizing and creating all the events that were happening around the architecture. So organizing a series of talks that on the topic of architecture and theater, organizing also a workshop with the scenographer, but also inviting the actor to perform in that space, and even creating some events for children and some kind of small workshops together with children. And besides that, we were also responsible for the graphical work in order to publish those events. So in this project, we were also very much expanding our task as architects. And here you can see the poster that we were just seeing in the image before. And yeah, some images of the series of talks that were taking place in that pavilion. There was also a small exhibition that was created and designed by us that you can see here on top, hanging from the structure. And of course, the performances that were taking place, and the actor that we were inviting, he was not preparing any defined play before, but instead he was always improvising and always reacting again to the architecture, but also to the people's behaving towards this play, but also towards the architecture. So in the end, there was always this interplay between the actor, the audience, and the architecture.
Okay. The project we are showing now is a competition we did together with the office year 17. It's a competition that was promoted by the municipality of Cascais with the goal to create several housing units as well as a student residence. This is the given plot, and as you can see, it belongs to an original master plan that had the intention to create a large free space within the buildings for green areas and collective use equipment. Here you can see the view from that central space, looking to the ocean on the south and also to the wineries on the north. And the rules of the competition had this imposition not to go higher than the 5 floors in order to keep the relation to the existing buildings. But on the other hand, there was the need to build 10,000 square meters of program, which means that the municipality, as the promoter, was asking the architects to occupy the ground floor more than it was supposed. And because of that, you need to block the central area and make a completely different typology in this neighborhood. So because of that, we have decided to grow in height and to leave almost 75% of the ground floor as a free space for public use, as the original plan was asking for. And despite of going higher on the north part, we wanted to take care of the alignments and the heights of the buildings around, so the new building could also dialogue with the context. The proposal itself was composed of 3 elements. One small pavilion of common use that marks the north boundary of that large public space. Then the main residential building with 5 floors and common uses there on the ground floor. And then the 8th floor student residence that dominates the landscape and that has a common ground there on the roof of the existing building. The student residence block there on the top can also be read as a critique to the hierarchical logic of the house rental, once we are giving the better views to the students that are changing every year. And here on the section, you can see how the ground floor is continuing from south to north, even crossing this small pavilion. And especially you can also see how the roof of this building, it's the ground for the residents on the top. The building itself, it's based on a structural grid of 4 by 4 meters, which contributes to a flexibility of the whole system. It is possible to create a room that is not too big and a living room that is not too small, of course, depending on the different typologies. So as you can see here, there is this internal core where you have all the vertical circulations, infrastructures, and the fixed humid areas. And then there is this outside perimeter, completely open and flexible to adapt into different typologies. With the time, families are growing and others are becoming smaller, and this system can react to those situations. And they can also incorporate some shared areas or working spaces. So the main structural logic you can see on these drawings, it's rigid, regular and bidirectional system, which allows a very flexible system and also non-hierarchical organization of the different houses. They are bigger and smaller in size, and they have their own identity regarding the specific position of the apartment, but they all share the same principles. You can see also the residents, the student residents, these conditions also applied, and the public or the common areas are also changing in every floor, creating different relations to the surroundings. And on the outside layer, there's a balance to the rigid system and structure that creates the architectural expression of the whole. So with these red textile elements, you can control the sun, but you can also define this limit between the balconies and the views on the right side, and also the house on the inside. And they also create this variation, this constant variation within this main frame. And here it's the view from the central part, where you see this continuity also to the wineries on the north. So to conclude, we can argue that this idea of common structures must be read in a much broader sense, as they can address different scales, fields, and contexts. They talk about the structure of the load-bearing forces. They talk about the space and its character. And because of that, they also talk about the structure of a certain ideology. Just like in the theater, they can be read as a background for the action to happen, as Aldo Rossi would say. That's it.
Super. That was really interesting, the three presentations. I think my main take from the three groups is that I am very impressed and admire your courage to set up an office with all the uncertainty that's associated with it. And the projects that you have shown show a lot of motivation and eagerness to, make it happen. And I think the three groups engage in architecture with different approaches, using speculation, diverse practice approach, academic, which are all really interesting, and also many different scales. I wanted just to start off as a question, kind of to all of you, and just raise your hand if you would like to start. What has been the biggest challenge since starting the practice? There are so many, you can't think of one. No, but that, I mean, I'm personally starting my own practice now, so I can think of a lot of challenges. Maybe I'm the only one that finds it difficult, but I think finding clients, I'm kind of doing a business plan now, and the main objective is to find clients. It's as boring as that. So, for example, Tom and Leah, since you're the first, I read that you have become part of this collective in Norwich. Was that a way to get more work, or tell us a bit about that?
I think fundamentally, I think it's a bit about sort of accessing knowledge in a kind of simple way, because as a small company, you don't have the resources or the means to simply employ engineers or environmental consultants and so on. So it's effectively a network of professionals who can quickly distribute knowledge and information between themselves, and also bid for work in a more kind of coherent way, because I think the challenge for us is trying to to break away from the kind of residential model, and also to sort of manage our workload in a sustainable way, because you can easily become quite swamped as a small company quite quickly, or vice versa. You can be very quiet very quickly. So it's managing that, I think.
I had a question actually about your presentation. The small plots, that was super interesting to see. You said that the real estate agents then went on to sell the plots. Do they sell them with your project, or did they use your project to give clients or buyers to give them the chance to see the potential of a crappy site.
Well, yeah. Oh.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, no, I think because we then get planning permission, the site basically obviously increase in value with the planning. I think obviously like one of the plot actually has been built by an architect. So I suppose actually he might not do what we designed, but I think at least, you know, the discussion is there with the planners and there is planning there as well. So yeah, they said it essentially with or design.
I think it's mainly about the risk. I think like the economic side of it is that it's a risky site, and then we are basically trying to remove some of that risk. I think
yeah, that's a great way to like just dive in and make your work as architects practical and relevant. I think that's really important for architects to do that and not to stay in a bubble of theory that can be difficult to engage with many times. I had a question for depA. First of all, why depA? What does that stand for, that name?
I think I can join this this question with the one you asked before about the difficulties of starting the office. It's well connected, because one thing that, well, when you are starting, everything is difficult, as you know, and you have to have a strong will and a strong power to pedal forward. But one thing that is very typical of our generation is the way we try to join forces or try to gather interest of very open circle, and I mean not only of similar practices, but also people from other areas, not only architecture, design, etc. And try to gather and get the strengths of each team. So since the beginning, when we came to Porto and we started working, we joined me, João, and Luis, also with some other friends at that time. We were 7 when we started, and we had this view of joining forces and try to find clients as well, wherever you can find them. So we acted not as a firm or as this kind of authorship practice, but as a department of architecture. So we had this kind of joint forces of all our friends, and we were 7 digging everywhere to find the work and to find a place to act. So that's why we were a department of architecture and not only an office, and hence the name depA from there.
Yeah.
After the beginning, we kept the lesson, and we started doing because well, the easiest way to find your to find work, as Lee and Tom were saying, is also the competitions. But you know that these take a huge time and resources from the office. So it was inevitable for us to start doing partnerships to achieve better results in the competition. So we could somehow balance the effort of all the teams involved, and that's something that we take throughout our practice, and we've been doing ever since the beginning.
Yeah, there's someone, Mariana Rodrigues, saying exactly that it's really important for architects to learn and kind of get good at joining forces and sharing resources and acting collaboratively. And we also have Inês Dantas saying that in architecture school we don't learn about business practice and financial sustainability, and I guess it's also something really important to do or to get good at. Definitely I'm struggling on that front, completely lost with the Portuguese tax system. How to maximize my work, and anyway, I won't get into that. I wanted to ask you something, depA. Your landscape project reminded me a lot of, I don't know if you are familiar with the Norwegian tourist route stops. I worked in an office called 3RW Architects, and in the early 2000s, that was their main project. So like these viewpoints that the Norwegian government gave to emerging practices. I thought that was a really beautiful project. And I was wondering who was the client for that?
Yeah, actually, well, the client in Portuguese is CIM, which is the Northern Portugal Community of Municipalities. So 10 municipalities joined together for this project. I mean, this institution does exist. They work together as an institution, and they had this kind of event, and in 2018, I think it was it. Yes, in 2018, they challenged us as this group we talked about, ODUS, the group that thought about this project as a whole. And they challenged us to make a project to somehow enhance the relationship between the population and the landscape in the north of Portugal. So that's why we said that our piece of work was part of a network of 9 others, so in total 10 pieces of work that combined works from artists and architects. And all of them had a special spot in a special landscape area. And yes, somehow, of course, it was one of our references was, of course, this strong project, Norwegian project, which also makes this relationship between human and nature. And yeah, of course, it was a direct relation as well.
Yeah, I think Norwegian, based on my 3-4 years living there, are really good at, I mean, it's in the core of their culture is their relationship with nature. So yeah, they are really good with those projects. I think for me, it's the best of Norway is the landscape. And I wish in Portugal there was better access to nature and landscape. I went on a road trip to Gerês. It's this natural area in the north of Portugal. And I found it frustrating how little access there was to the landscape, not just to be in the car. In Portugal, we still have that culture of car experiences. Maybe I will do a speculative project on that.
Actually, yeah, we are more used to this viewing relationship of the landscape, and all these small pieces wanted to enhance the relationship between human and the landscape in a more physical way. Most of them, it's not only something to see or something to use, where your body takes part of the experience.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I think in Portugal, our culture with outdoors is more in the beach. We are very good at going to the beach. It's like core culture, and I love it also. And now JQTS, which in Portuguese you would say JQTS, like quite a different pronunciation. It's interesting that you have this more academic approach, and your imagery is very unique and striking. And if you go on your website, you can really tell like there's a strong identity. I was curious, how did you two meet?
Who wants to start? Yeah, actually, we were meeting, or in my case, it was an internship. I think for Joao was already in the first real job in the office of Peso von Erikshausen in Chile. So this is where we met in 2010, I think, or 11, and worked for several months together, also with some other guys, of course. But it's somehow when we decided, or I decided for myself, that I would also like to spend some time in Portugal afterwards. And yeah, more or less directly after this internship in Chile, I was going to Portugal, still doing Erasmus, was the end of my study. And basically it's when we started to do projects together.
Yeah.
And this is maybe also one difference, or maybe a bit special, that since then we were always developing projects together, but we never had really this point saying, okay, now we are an office and we are doing just our projects. It was always this kind of fluent process, and always this being involved in teaching and academic and so on. And yeah, and in that way also, yeah, keeping some independency because of this second lack of academic.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's very interesting to have that academic practice, and I can tell that it feeds into your practical architectural practice too. And by curiosity, Tim, what is that model behind you? Is that a house, or is that a project?
Yeah, it's a holiday house that unfortunately was not built, but it's a project for Germany. Looks a bit more like Germany than Portugal, right?
I'm very interested in failed projects that never went ahead. I think in life nowadays we talk too much about just success stories, and Instagram, the Instagram culture makes us only post the beautiful photo and the final project, and it looks like it was so easy, but much more of life is really hard and not easy at all. And I find sometimes Instagram is a bit depressing, and I'm bad at this, because I also only post really success things, and I only post photos of my baby smiling, and it's not like that 100% of the time, but everyone tells me he's such a good baby, but they don't know the real stuff. I had a question that I don't remember now, because I start talking and I don't stop. And I can hear myself talk in the living room. I'm really interested by all the ways that you guys find to stay relevant and stay active, and keep somehow financially stable, paying yourselves. I am wondering, what do you have in mind for your practice in the future? What do you guys work with 5-year plans? Do you have like set like strategies, or is it more come as you go, trying to survive, trying to keep your head above water? Someone give me an answer.
I think for us, speaking personally, I think we definitely want to keep the practice small, so that we can be as agile as we don't want to have loads of staff. We don't want to have the worry and be the sort of not be able to work on the projects ourselves. I think that's a huge part of why we're doing what we're doing. So I think we want to be, the benefit of being small is that you can dedicate all of your efforts and resources into a project truthfully. You can say to a client, this is going to be our focus for the next X number of months or years. So I think that's really crucial for us.
Interesting, yeah. You always think that something is successful if it grows a lot, but actually I did the business course a couple of months ago, and growing business is actually really difficult. This growth is threat to a business, but
I guess the stress as well to find more work when you are more and more people, when currently I think as 2 people it's easier to just, if there is not work coming, you can still deal with it, I guess. And there is more flexibility as well.
Yeah, and I guess depA are the ones that have dealt with the most, because there are 10 people. It's quite a lot. I'm interested that you have a journalist in your team also. Is it for the, was it for the Venice project that you hired a journalist, or was it for your PR or business development or?
Well, no, it was well before that. We, as I was saying before, we started being 7 architects together. Of course, it was always a big mess, but also a big fun all the time. And somehow some elements went away, and the 3 of us kept the practice together. And then we started growing our team slowly, and when we reached this figure of around 10 people, which is for us a bit what we want. It's a fine dimension for our practice. We started to feel the need to have also someone that was not an architect, just because of that, which is important, but also someone that could help us communicate what we do, organize our practice, and then, we were not, of course, we were not looking for a journalist specifically. We were looking for a person that could help us in managing all these different kind of areas. And Filipa came to help us at that time, and well, fortunately, we won the competition for the curatorship of the Biennale, and she is also a great piece in the puzzle to help us dealing with that. It was also a happy coincidence. Well, about the size again, we are happy being 10. We also don't want to be huge. 10 people already is a big stuff to manage, but what we want is to grow our team older. So we want it to be like a long-term collaboration. We want to keep everyone as long as they are happy with us, and that's what we are trying to do since the beginning, and it's also what has been happening. So we know people will not stay with us for a huge time, but we are happy if they like to stay with us.
Yeah, that's a really good objective, and not.
Luis also has something to say.
Yeah, I just want to say something about the number of the team. Of course, that if you want to have access to different kinds of commissions, like a collective housing project, it's very difficult to work with just 2 or 3 people. Actually, I think that if JQTS won the competition for Cascais, of course they have to adjust the team. So actually it was what happened with us. Some projects have appeared, and of course that we need to have a good response. We don't want to have, of course, good commissions and then a not so professional response.
Yeah, no, that's great. I have here 2 people asking the same question. It's Inês Dantas and Jorge Salgueiro Ropero. They are asking to JQTS as a network studio, not depending on a physical studio. They are wondering what your biggest challenges are. Like, how do you keep the timegeist without having the feeling of having 2 separate studios? It's a bit like having an open relationship. And I think this question is very pertinent right now, even more because of the pandemic. Like, as for us, João, Luis, and Carlos could be in 3 different cities, you know? So it's a relevant question because we are living in a more fractured, remote model. But you guys have more experience than us, who have been more crammed in offices together. So how do you guys do that? Is it Skype? Is it WhatsApp? Is it letters.
Actually, just one point about the question before when we were talking about the failed projects, because I think the offices, maybe in the end they have more failed projects than realized projects. And of course, the ideas behind it are also kept. And today, for example, we decided to show this competition where we were excluded. So it's a completely failed competition. But on the other hand, the research and the insight that is behind it's of course something to continue in other projects. And about this question, yeah, we actually, when we started, I was living in Spain. So we were always between these three places, and there was completely no physical office space. Of course, always trying to coordinate the timetables because, yeah, the time in Germany it's 1 hour more than in Portugal and so on. And then with the time, we were slowly establishing the things a bit more, and then we had finally a space in Lisbon. But what we do usually is to meet every month or every 2 months, usually here in Lisbon, sometimes in Germany, and it's always helping a lot for the projects and the process to go on most fastly. But during this pandemic, we were also improving somehow our tools. For example, we were never using Zoom; it was always with WhatsApp and Skype and so on. And yeah, now I think in this sense, the pandemic was not a big question, or was not a catastrophe for the office. We were just keeping the same system, but maybe with different tools.
Yeah, yeah, super. I think it's for me, yeah, a lot of conclusions arise from our conversation, and one of the main ones is the idea that as architects we really need to be good collaborators. And I actually once read an interview with Eduardo Sotomora where he said that the main thing about the architect is his or her ability to deal with all the different professions, be a mediator, be a diplomat. It's kind of what we talked about in the previous session of Quinzena'. And one thing that came to my mind before is that 2 people in this session talked about Erasmus. And it fascinates me how important this program is to so many people, and we don't really talk about it a lot. I think Erasmus, I'm sounding like a EU propaganda, but I am. Erasmus is like, for me, is maybe the best project from the European Union, because it really, makes all these connections possible. And I think, yeah, it brings a lot of wealth, and it's a shame that the UK will no longer be part of the Erasmus program. It's dramatic. But I think we've had a really good conversation here, and I wanted to thank all of you for joining. And I wish you very good luck in your future endeavors, and may your practice keep going and your motivation keep strong. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good evening.
Thank you.